I shouldn't be posting this. If you're hearing this on YouTube, instead of reading it on Reddit, it means I failed. It means this account was wiped, this thread was locked, or someone decided I knew too much for too long. I'm typing fast because every instinct I have is screaming that time matters now, that whatever window I accidentally opened is already closing. Let me be clear about something before you keep going. Most people think the dark web is just drugs, fake passports, or edgy hitman myths. That's what I thought too. That's what you're supposed to think. Those are the stories that keep you from noticing the other doors. I don't know how long this post will stay up. I don't know if refreshing the page is what alerted them, or if it was the moment I tried to copy the link and my screen froze for half a second longer than it should have. Small things feel enormous when you realize you're no longer alone with your thoughts. If this suddenly cuts off, if the text ends mid-sentence, don't assume it's a glitch. Assume I hesitated. Assume I heard something behind me. Assume I was right to be afraid. I've already rewritten the first paragraph 3 times because it felt too specific, too honest. That's another thing nobody tells you. You start censoring yourself instinctively, like your fear learned the rules before you did. I'm not asking for help. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm just documenting this while I still can, because I clicked something that doesn't exist anymore. I wish I had stopped reading when the warnings. And this started as a joke. I didn't wake up one day planning to end up on the dark web. I wasn't chasing adrenaline, or trying to feel edgy, or hunting for some forbidden thrill. My life at the time was aggressively normal. Wake up, commute, sit under fluorescent lights, pretend to care about emails that could have waited, come home, scroll until my eyes hurt, sleep, repeat. If there was a problem, it was boredom, not desperation. I worked an office job that paid just enough to keep me comfortable, and just little enough to keep me complaining. My coworkers were fine in that harmless, forgettable way. We talked about streaming shows, rising rent, and how everything online felt recycled. Horror stories, conspiracies, and deep internet. Stuff came up the same way people talk about astrology, half joking, half rolling their eyes. That's where the dark web entered the conversation. Not dramatically, not ominously. Someone mentioned it during lunch like it was a punchline. Isn't that where you buy a hitman for $50? One of them said. Another laughed. No, that's Craigslist. I remember saying, it's probably just scams and cops pretending to be criminals. I actually believed that. I thought people exaggerated because they needed something to be afraid of. The internet does that. It turns boredom into mythology. That night, I fell into the same routine I always did. Couch. Phone. Reddit. Mindless scrolling through the familiar mix of memes, news, and half-true horror posts written by people who wanted attention. I'd been reading creepypastas for years. I knew the beats. I knew when a story was trying too hard. There's a comfort in thinking you're too smart to be fooled. I trusted my ability to spot fake fear, to separate performance from reality. I told myself that if something truly dangerous existed online, it would be obvious, loud, impossible to miss. Looking back, that assumption feels embarrassingly naive. That's why one thread stood out. Not because it was well written, not because it was scary, but because it kept disappearing. The title was boring, almost deliberately so. Something like, has anyone else seen this? No flair. No awards. The first time I clicked it, the page failed to load. The second time, it was gone entirely. I assumed it was a glitch, or mods doing cleanup. In the comments of another post, someone mentioned it in passing. Threads back again. They wrote. Someone replied, stop asking about that. Another said, mods don't like it. I checked the user profiles out of curiosity. One was deleted. Another hadn't posted since that day. I laughed it off. I even typed a comment I didn't post, joking about how people always assume censorship means something spooky. I told myself it was nothing. Reddit has drama. Mods overreact. Accounts disappear all the time. Still, I kept checking. Every few hours, the thread would reappear under a new account, always with the same dull title, always locked within minutes. No links. No screenshots. just vague warnings, and people arguing about whether it was real. A few users hinted at seeing something before it vanished, but none of them would describe it clearly. They spoke in fragments, like people afraid of saying the wrong word. Some people mocked them. Others begged for details. The pattern repeated itself, until it stopped being funny and started feeling intentional, like an experiment running quietly in the background, while everyone argued about whether it existed at all. Even I started to wonder why moderators were reacting so quickly, and why no one ever archived it. Curiosity stopped feeling casual and started feeling personal, like the thread was waiting. One comment stuck with me, because it felt oddly sincere. If you're curious, don't ask for the link. If you know, you know. I closed the app after that, annoyed at myself for feeling intrigued. I made dinner, watched a show, lived my normal life, but the idea lingered like an unfinished sentence. I wasn't scared. I was curious. That felt important at the time. That's when I found the thread nobody would link directly. I found the thread by accident, which is the only way I think it could ever be found. It didn't show up when I searched for it directly, and it never appeared on the front page. It surfaced in the margins, buried inside a comment chain that had nothing to do with it. Someone replied to a joke with a single sentence. It's back again. No link. No explanation. Just those 3 words, sitting there like bait. I clicked the username. Brand new account. No history. No karma. I refreshed the page, half expecting it to be gone, but the comment stayed. When I checked again 10 minutes later, the account was deleted. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it felt like confirmation. The thread itself looked wrong in a way that's hard to explain. Same title every time. Always vague. Always harmless on the surface. Has anyone else seen this? Sometimes it was posted by accounts with auto-generated names. Sometimes by usernames that looked carefully chosen, like they meant something to someone. None of them lasted more than a few minutes before the comments were locked. The weirdest part wasn't that mods shut it down. Mods shut things down all the time. It was how fast they reacted and how quiet they were about it. No stickied explanation. No warning message. Just a locked thread and eventually removal. If you refreshed at the wrong time, it was like it had never existed. I started taking screenshots. Not because I thought I'd need proof, but because the pattern bothered me. The title stayed the same. The wording inside changed slightly, like someone was testing different phrasings. One version said, "I didn't mean to find it." Another said, "I don't think it wants to be found." That one was gone in under 2 minutes. In the comments, during the brief windows when they were open, people spoke carefully. No one asked direct questions. The ones who did stopped replying entirely. Check their profiles if you don't believe me. Scroll back far enough and you'll see it last comment asking for details, then nothing. No farewell posts. No explanations. Just silence. One username kept appearing across multiple threads. Same spelling. Same avatar. They never posted links. They never described what they saw. They only ever said things like, "You've already read too much," or "Don't mirror it." The account lasted longer than the others, weeks instead of minutes. Then one day, it vanished too, like it had served its purpose. That's when people started hinting at rules. Not rules written anywhere, just behaviors everyone seemed to understand instinctively. Don't quote the post. Don't archive it publicly. Don't ask for mirrors and comments. Someone mentioned TOR addresses in passing, buried inside a paragraph about something else, like they were hoping automated systems wouldn't notice. Another user replied with a string of nonsense characters that looked like encryption. The comment was removed almost instantly. When it came back, the characters were gone, replaced with, "You shouldn't have done that." At that point, it stopped feeling like moderation and started feeling like policing. Not by Reddit, not exactly. Something else was deciding how much attention was acceptable, how much curiosity crossed a line. It reminded me of how people talk around dangerous subjects in real life, lowering their voices without realizing it. If you're listening to this and thinking it sounds fake, I get it. I would have thought the same thing. But check the old archives. Look at deleted threads. Look for titles that shouldn't be there but are. You won't find links, but you'll find gaps where conversations end abruptly. I told myself I was just watching internet drama unfold. I wasn't involved. I wasn't participating. That lie lasted right up until the moment I realized the thread wasn't just recurring. It was waiting. The final version I saw stayed up longer than any of the others. Long enough for people to argue about whether it was an ARG, a hoax, or some elaborate troll. Long enough for screenshots to circulate in private messages. Long enough for me to notice something I hadn't before. The account that posted it responded to exactly one comment, and only with a question. Why are you still here? That question sat there unanswered until the thread locked. When it disappeared, the comment went with it. But I remembered the phrasing. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't threatening. It sounded genuinely curious, like the poster was surprised anyone had made it that far. I told myself I'd stop looking. I told myself curiosity wasn't worth the unease creeping into my routine. Then, late one night, while scrolling through a different subreddit entirely, I saw the same title again. No link. No comments. Just the title, staring back at me. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just observing anymore. I was expected to act, and I did. Unfortunately. I didn't expect the site to look like anything. I mean that literally. No skulls, no gore, no red text screaming at me from a black background. Just a blank page that took a little too long to load, like it was thinking about whether I was worth the effort. My browser fan kicked up, and for a second I thought my connection had dropped. Then text appeared, simple and gray, centered on the screen. No logo. No menu. Just a sentence that read, "You're connected." I stared at it waiting for something else to load. It didn't. The cursor blinked, but there was no obvious place to type. No prompt, no instructions. It felt less like a website and more like standing in an empty room, aware that someone else was already there. I told myself this was just clever design. Minimalism. Aesthetic nonsense meant to unsettle people. That rational voice lasted right up until the text changed without me touching anything. "You came from the comments," it said. I froze. I hadn't typed that. I hadn't clicked anything that would tell it where I'd come from. My hands hovered over the keyboard, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing sounded in the room. The page shifted again, lines rearranging themselves slowly, like someone choosing their words carefully. "Most people don't get this far," it added. "They read about it. You didn't stop." I leaned back in my chair, laughing under my breath. "Okay," I muttered, because talking felt safer than silence. "Creepy script. I get it." The sound of my voice made the room feel smaller, like I'd acknowledged something that was waiting for permission. The site responded immediately. "You don't," it said. "You think this is about fear. It's about attention." I felt a pressure behind my eyes, the dull ache that comes from staring at screens too long. Only I hadn't been staring that long. The room felt warmer, or maybe I just noticed my skin. The sense of being watched wasn't abstract anymore. It had weight, like someone standing just behind me, close enough to breathe. More text appeared, forming a block this time. "We don't use images," it explained. "They distract from recognition." I tried to look away, to focus on something else in the room, but my eyes kept snapping back to the screen. The letters felt wrong, not visually, but conceptually, like they were slightly out of alignment with reality. It knew things I never typed. I thought, and the moment the idea crossed my mind, a new line appeared. "You wonder how," it said. "You assume surveillance. That's comforting." A number appeared in the corner of the screen. A countdown. No label. No units. Just digits ticking down at a steady pace. I didn't know what it meant, only that my chest tightened every time it changed. I pushed my chair back and stood up, half expecting the feeling to fade, once I wasn't right in front of the screen. It didn't. The sensation followed me, anchored to my awareness rather than my position. When I looked back, the site had changed again. A small chat window had opened at the bottom of the page. No username. No icon. Just a blinking cursor, waiting. I didn't type. I didn't breathe. I watched as the first message appeared on its own. You're early. The words sat there longer than they should have, long enough for my brain to cycle through denial, adrenaline, and a childish urge to close the laptop and pretend none of this was real. I waited for the follow-up, the punchline, something that would reframe the message as scripted, automated, harmless. Nothing came. The countdown continued its silent march, each change drawing my attention back like a magnet. I became acutely aware of my apartment then, of how ordinary it all was. The hum of the refrigerator. The streetlight leaking through the blinds. My reflection faintly visible in the dark screen, superimposed over words that felt like they were meant for someone else. The contrast made my stomach twist. This was my life, my space, and yet the center of gravity had shifted decisively to whatever was on the other side of that connection. I thought about the people who stopped posting, about the usernames that went quiet, about how curiosity had brought me here without ever asking for permission. The site hadn't threatened me. It hadn't asked for anything. That felt worse. Like a door held open, waiting to see if I would step through on my own. My hands finally dropped to the keyboard, not to type, but to steady myself. The sense of being watched intensified, sharpening into something almost expectant. Whatever, early, meant it implied a schedule, a sequence, a process that didn't revolve around me. I swallowed and glanced at the countdown again, realizing I had no idea what would happen when it reached 0, only that the site seemed confident I'd stay long enough to find out. That certainty settled over me like a weight, heavy and intimate, and I understood, with sudden clarity, that leaving now wouldn't mean escape. It would only mean delay. Whatever this was, it had already noticed me, already accounted for my presence, and was content to wait. I sat back down, eyes locked on the screen, as the cursor blinked down something I wasn't ready to understand. The first reply came before I decided whether I should say anything at all. A new line appeared beneath the words, "You're early." USER1, don't answer questions yet. USER2, is this another case? USR03, stop posting names. None of them had profile pictures. None of them had timestamps. The messages stacked on top of each other like they'd always been there, like I'd just tuned in late to an ongoing conversation. I typed, "What is this place?" then deleted it before hitting enter. The cursor blinked, patient, almost amused. USER01C. That's what I mean. USER01E. You can always tell who's new. I felt a flicker of relief that it wasn't just me and the site anymore. People meant rules, even if I didn't understand them yet. People meant patterns. I typed carefully this time. "Did you all find this from Reddit?" The response was immediate. USART07, don't say where you came from. USART09, they know anyway. USART1. You're already logged as a carryover. I didn't know what that meant, but the word carryover lodged itself in my chest. It implied continuity, history. That this wasn't a single visit, but part of something longer. More users appeared as I watched, their messages short and clipped, like everyone was conserving something. Attention maybe, or time. UCR-9, how early? UCR-3, earlier than last time. Last time. That phrase echoed. I scanned the chat for context that wasn't there. Last time for who? I typed before I could stop myself. There was a pause. The longest one yet. Long enough for the countdown in the corner to tick twice. User Zo1sing. You shouldn't ask that. User Zo1sing. You shouldn't ask anything specific. Someone else chimed in, a new name I hadn't seen before. User Twentune mods used to warn people like this. Before they stopped pretending. That felt deliberate, a hook thrown directly at me. Mods. Reddit. Familiar ground wrapped around something that clearly wasn't. Pretending what? I typed. The answer came from a different user. User Dwunner30. That this is entertainment. I thought of the stories I'd read over the years, the serialized horror posts, the comments full of people trying to guess what was real. I'd always assumed the meta talk was part of the fun. Seeing it referenced here, stripped of irony, made my mouth go dry. User Dars70. If you stay past Phase 2, you can't pretend anymore. Phase 2. Another rule, implied but unexplained. My eyes flicked to the countdown again, my pulse sensing to its rhythm. What happens at Phase 2? This time, the pause felt heavier. User Yo1C, you don't ask about thresholds. User $3, especially not out loud. Then one user broke the pattern. User and $, you need to leave. The bluntness of it cut through the careful phrasing everyone else used. User E80, I'm serious. Close it. Disconnect. User DDD, they don't stop at observers anymore. Messages started stacking faster now, overlapping. User Dory9, don't scare them. User Hornyfew, it's already too late if they're here. User Doubter Tutors, is this another Mirror Kid situation? That one hit me hard. I'd read that story years ago, late at night, dismissing it as fiction, while still checking the locks afterward. Seeing it referenced casually, without explanation, made my skin prickle. User EDD, you don't joke about cases. User DIEDD, especially active ones. Their next message came in all at once, breaking the rhythm entirely. User DIANT, I stayed too long. I thought lurking didn't count. I thought not interacting meant I was safe. If you're reading this, you still have time. Don't try to understand it. Don't archive it. Don't. The message cut off mid-sentence. Their username dimmed, then vanished. No one commented on it. No, what happened? No reactions at all. The chat moved on like a current closing over a stone, and the silence that followed felt intentional, enforced. My hands were shaking now. I hadn't noticed when that started. I hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether saying anything would mark me further, or whether staying silent was already an answer. A system notification appeared in the center of the screen, overlaying the chat. File received. I hadn't clicked anything. I hadn't accepted anything. The download bar began to fill anyway. I closed the laptop the moment the download finished. Like that alone could undo what had already happened. The room felt louder afterward, every mundane sound amplified by adrenaline. I stood there for a long time, staring at the dark screen, half expecting it to light back up on its own. It didn't. Nothing dramatic happened. That should have been comforting. Instead, it felt wrong. I unplugged my router, pulled the power cord from the wall, like I was yanking a plug out of something alive. My phone buzzed in my hand almost immediately, and my stomach dropped before I even looked at the screen. No signal. No Wi-Fi, one new message. The message came from my own number. You disconnected too early. My Tar browser wasn't open. My laptop was shut. My internet connection was dead. I stood there rereading the message, waiting for some rational explanation to surface. But my thoughts kept circling the same conclusion. Whatever rules existed online didn't stop at the edge of the screen. I didn't reply. I didn't know how. I turned my phone off and left it on the kitchen counter, like it was something that might vibrate again if I held it too long. I slept badly that night, waking up every few hours, convinced I'd heard typing, or whispers, or the faint electronic chirp of a notification that wasn't there. Morning brought sunlight and traffic noise and the illusion of normalcy. I clung to it hard, showered, dressed, went to work, told myself I'd overreacted, that fear had filled in the gaps where logic should have been. By the time I stepped outside, I almost believed it. The city looked the same as it always did. People rushing, coffee cups, headphones. 1,000 separate lives colliding briefly on the sidewalk. That contrast should have grounded me. Instead, it made me feel exposed, like I was the only one who knew the stage was fake. My phone turned itself back on in my pocket. I didn't touch it. I felt the vibration anyway, steady and insistent. When I finally looked, there were no new messages. Just a notification banner that vanished before I could read it. The screen reflected my face back at me, pale and drawn, and for a second I wondered how much of what I was feeling showed. At lunch, a stranger sat across from me at a crowded cafe. Middle-aged, ordinary. He stirred his drink without looking up and said, casually, "You should have let Phase 1 finish." I froze. The words landed with surgical precision. He still didn't look at me. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice thinner than I wanted. He smiled into his cup. That's what they all say at this point. Then he stood, tossed his trash, and left without another word. I stayed there long after my food went cold, heart hammering, scanning every face for recognition that might not have been there. No one looked back. No one cared. That was almost worse. The rest of the day blurred. Every reflection felt like it lingered a fraction too long. Every phone screen nearby felt pointed. I kept thinking about rules, about thresholds, about how UCR-18 had panicked, about how cleanly they'd vanished. When I got home, my phone buzzed again. One message. You're being inefficient. I threw the phone across the room. It skidded to a stop without breaking. Another buzz followed. New activity detected. This time it wasn't a text, it was a Reddit notification. A new post, same dull title, same formatting. And this time, I didn't have to read far to recognize myself in it. It described my apartment, my job, the cafe, the stranger's words, paraphrased but unmistakable. At the bottom, a line appeared that hadn't been there before. Subject shows increased awareness. Monitoring continues. That's when I understood. This wasn't a story I was reading anymore. I was the update. I stopped thinking of it as a website after that. Websites don't watch you learn. They don't adjust their behavior when you notice patterns. They don't write you into themselves. Whatever I had accessed wasn't a place you visited. It was a process you entered, and once you were inside it, geography stopped mattering. The closest explanation I've found is buried in a comment thread that vanished within an hour. Someone described the dark web not as a hidden internet, but as a filter layered over the visible one, a way of separating people who consume information from people who respond to it. Most users bounce off at the surface, satisfied with myths and headlines. A few keep digging, not because they're brave, but because curiosity overrides caution. That's when the watching begins. The post didn't say who built it. It didn't speculate about motives. It treated the system like a natural phenomenon, something discovered rather than created. Experiments were mentioned, not as tests, but as observations. What happens when you show a human a truth without context? What happens when you let them see themselves being observed? The word, watchers, came up more than once. Not capitalized. Not defined. Just watchers, like it was obvious what that meant. Another commenter corrected them. Observers, they said. Watching implies intent. That distinction bothered me more than any threat could have. Intent implies choice. Observation implies inevitability. Government agencies were referenced only in the past tense, as participants, not controllers. There were hints of early involvement, of funding and containment efforts that failed quietly. Jurisdiction means nothing when the thing you're trying to regulate isn't centralized. You can't shut down a filter without shutting down everything it passes through. Rules existed, but no one claimed to know where they came from. Don't document publicly. Don't name entities. Don't let curiosity turn into comprehension. Each rule felt less like a law and more like a scar, learned through consequences instead of instruction. Entities were mentioned, but never described. No shapes, no origins, just roles. Something that notices, something that records, something that intervenes when attention reaches a certain density. The language was careful, almost reverent, like superstition layered over technical jargon. One line kept resurfacing across different threads, posted by different users who never acknowledged each other. You don't find it. It finds you. At first I dismissed it as theatrics. Later, I realized it was a warning disguised as inevitability. The dark web, as they described it, wasn't hidden to protect others from it. It was hidden to protect itself from saturation. Too much exposure collapsed the process. Too little made it meaningless. What it needed was a steady stream of near misses. People who got close enough to react, but not close enough to understand. Observers became subjects when they crossed an invisible threshold. Not when they clicked a link, but when they recognized themselves in the system. Awareness was the trigger. Participation was optional. Recognition was not. That explained the thread written about me. The stranger in the cafe, the messages from my own number. I hadn't broken a rule by leaving early. I'd broken one by realizing there were rules at all. The explanation ended abruptly, mid-thought, like so many others. No conclusion. No escape route. Just a final sentence that felt less like advice and more like an obituary. Once you notice the filter, you become part of it. I closed the app and sat there, phone heavy in my hand, understanding for the first time that something fundamental had shifted. Whatever phase I'd entered didn't come with instructions, only consequences. The system no longer needed my curiosity. It had my attention, my pattern, my consent by awareness alone. That was the threshold I'd crossed, whether I wanted to admit it or not. And there was no version of my life now, where I went back to not knowing. I tried to disappear the way people always think they can, by erasing evidence instead of attention. Deleting your past doesn't delete what noticed you. But I wasn't ready to accept that yet. I started with the obvious things, the accounts tied to my name, my email, my habits. Reddit first. Delete account. Confirm password. Final warning. Gone. I felt a brief, pathetic rush of relief. Then the backups. Old usernames. Throwaway emails. Anything I'd ever used to comment, lurk, or watch. Each deletion felt like holding my breath underwater, convinced that if I stayed still long enough, something hunting by vibration might pass me by. I wiped my browser history, reinstalled my operating system, factory, reset my phone. I even changed my number, standing in a fluorescent store pretending this was normal adult business. It didn't help. I moved apartments within a week. Packed light. Left things behind on purpose, like shedding weight. New neighborhood, new routes, new routine. I told myself patterns were what got people caught, so I destroyed mine aggressively. I stopped checking Reddit, stopped reading comments, stopped searching. Ignorance, I hoped, could still be a kind of shelter. The guilt was worse than the fear. Guilt that I'd brought this on myself. Guilt that by reading, by listening, by staying curious, I might have contributed to something happening to others. I thought about USER to 18, about how quickly they'd unraveled, and wondered if I'd been the reason they vanished. Sleep became negotiation. Every night I promised myself I'd stop thinking about it if morning came without incident. Every morning I woke up disappointed. Small things kept slipping through. A stranger using my old username in conversation. An ad that referenced a phrase I'd never typed out loud. A reflection in a dark window that lagged half a second behind my movement. I avoided mirrors, avoided cameras, avoided conversations that lasted too long. I paid in cash, walked instead of taking rides, kept my head down like anonymity was a posture. Every precaution felt theatrical, like I was performing safety for an audience that wasn't impressed. I checked exits in every room and flinched at unfamiliar footsteps. The city didn't feel hostile, it felt observant. Even silence seemed recorded. I started apologizing out loud for things I hadn't done yet, bargaining with an absence that never answered. Each day I told myself I was closer to being forgotten, and each night I knew, with quiet certainty, that forgetting was never the point. It watched patience grow inside me, measuring endurance, waiting for the moment survival instincts gave way to acknowledgement and compliance without asking permission, or offering mercy at all. The final confirmation came quietly. I was unpacking in the new place when my phone buzzed, the new number still unfamiliar in my hand. One message. No sender listed, no notification sound. You can change locations, it read. You can change names. You can even change memories. Then the typing indicator appeared. But you already crossed the threshold. If you're hearing this on YouTube, it means I failed. I failed to disappear, failed to outpace what followed me, and failed to protect whatever fragile normalcy I thought I could cling to. The irony is that confessing feels safer than hiding, but only marginally. Typing these words, knowing they might vanish, knowing someone or something could already be reading them before you do. It's the closest I'll get to control. I want to tell you it's all over, but I can't. The rules aren't mine, and the watchers don't negotiate. They observe. They test. They measure curiosity the way a predator measures hesitation. I learned too late that curiosity isn't harmless. It's currency, and I spend it recklessly. If you're watching, maybe you'll be smarter. Maybe you'll close the tab before a countdown begins, before an anonymous username shows up in a thread you didn't follow. Or maybe, like me, you'll think it's all a joke, a glitch, a cool internet myth, until something unexplainable scratches at the corner of your life. I want to hear your theories. Have you stumbled across threads that vanish too fast, links that shouldn't exist, usernames that keep returning from nowhere? Comment, share, compare. But be cautious. Even curiosity leaves fingerprints. The irony of this confession is that it's both my warning and my surrender. I can't tell you exactly what happens next, because I don't fully know myself. I can only tell you what it feels like to be watched, to know you've passed a threshold, to realize the ordinary world is a fragile veneer. And one last thing. If someone links you a site and says it's fake, don't prove them wrong. Don't type, don't click, don't linger. Some doors were never meant to be opened, and some watchers never stop noticing. So here I am, leaving these words for you, trapped between my past and whatever follows me now. You're safe for the moment. But just remember, the screen you watch this on, the quiet of your room, the hum of your devices, none of that guarantees anything. The horror isn't paused. It's just patient.